Dragon Ball Z, the saga continues. In a world where evil has descended upon the planet, who will save us? Goku? Vegeta? Trunks? Time to join forces. This could be the final battle.
Hey, Vegeta.
What?
That's right. Action figures are now available from Irwin Toys, featuring a whole new line of Dragon Ball Z characters. Collect all your favorites. Now you can take Goku and the gang home with you and join in the excitement. Only Dragon Ball Z has this much action, this much excitement.
Dragon Ball Z, Earth faces a massive new Majin menace. Volatile Vegeta's under the evil Majin spell. Can noble Goku and loyal Gohan stop a powerful old friend and terrible new foe? Is it a job for Super Saiyan Gohan cloaked past the great Saiyan?
Oh man, those commercials sure take me back. From the days of patiently waiting for that next episode of Dragon Ball Z to find out just how Piccolo and Goku would defeat Raditz, or whether or not Frieza would face defeat at the hands of a Super Saiyan, or if Kid Buu would really blow up the earth for good. Sometimes the only thing we could do was turn to our figures, or let's be real here, more like toys back then, and use our imaginations to fill in the blanks until we finally found out what happened in the next episode. Till one day, Dragon Ball Z came to an end, and those of us who were kids during the series grew up, and for the most part put our old figures away or even threw them out. And things were quiet for a long time as Dragon Ball merchandise saw figures crawl into a slumber for the next decade. That is, until a company known as Tamashii Nations took up the mantle of producer and ushered in a brand new, bigger, better, ballsier era of Dragon Ball Z figures that we know today as SH Figuarts, Dragon Ball Z. Now let's take a look back at late 2009 where it all began. Now who better to kick off the line with other than Goku? Actually, wait a second. Piccolo was actually the first release in the line back in 2009, and despite the not so obvious pick for first release, the reception was quite warm. This Piccolo not only outclassed its older counterparts in terms of sculpt, paint apps and such, but it vastly surpassed them in terms of articulation as well. At this point, it was pretty safe to say that Piccolo pretty much beam cannoned the competition right into the next dimension. And in fact, out of all the interchangeable hands and faces he came with, that itself was pretty much the only thing that this release really lacked, an effect part for the special beam cannon. Did anyone else think it was special beam cannon as a kid, or was it just me? Now going back to what Piccolo came with, we saw the inclusion of a few different heads, hands, crossed arms, and even a separate cape piece. I mean, for their first attempt, Tamashii pretty much nailed it. Possibly the only aspect that left those unfamiliar with the manga scratching their heads was the color of the figure itself, but Tamashii made sure to make up for lost ground on this front a little later on. Now hot on the heels of Piccolo's successful release came of course Super Saiyan Goku in early 2010, and this is where most people began to take more notice of the line in general, and of course why not? One of, if not the series' most popular characters in his most recognized state. If you were a true Dragon Ball fan, you would want to own this figure at some point. Again, Super Saiyan Goku continues to dazzle us with the newly incorporated articulation, sculpt, and posability factors brought on by separate faceplates and hands. Perhaps the only desired additions left out were more faces, a base form head, and the actual anime colors again, rather than the manga ones. But hey, Tamashii had released an instant success, which garnered the line even more attention than before. And if Goku wasn't enough to get people going, his son Gohan followed quickly after and was the first figure to really ramp up the number of accessories and include 2 transformed states. That's right, Super Saiyan 1 and Super Saiyan 2. And with this, the initial trio which constituted the arrival of Figuarts was made, and we'd continue to see the releases reissued throughout the years. Now 2011 marked an important year for Figuarts. Why? Well, because a figure known as the Sdcc 2011 Goku was released, or as some like to call it, the Holy Grail of Figuarts. This figure not only established Figuarts' presence among other lines, but also featured a denser, heavier, feel-in-hand figure with better paint apps that were much more accurate to the anime. No one really knew it at the time, but picking up one of these guys was as good as picking up $1,000. And hey, if you were smart or lucky enough to buy two, my hat's off to you. 2011 also introduced Super Saiyan Vegeta, a character I don't have to tell you is extremely popular and high in demand. Similarly to Sdcc Goku, if you were lucky enough to pick this guy up, you'd be sitting pretty tight for the next couple of years, as this Super Saiyan Vegeta would mark the only release of a Super Saiyan Vegeta for many years to come, despite the figure's high popularity. Now 2012 was a year that saw the most releases from Tamashii in a single year ever since the line started, with a total of 3 normal releases and 1 Sdcc exclusive. The first figure to kick this year off was Super Saiyan 3 Goku, and as big of a release that this might have been at the time, it was probably one of the first figures to spark some controversy and divide the fandom on whether or not this figure lives up to the Super Saiyan 3 hype or just die out. While the figure provided unquestionably good features such as the articulated hair, halo, and aura effect pieces, it was top heavy and the paint scheme was just atrocious. Hey, I've even gone so far as to include this figure on my top 5 worst Figuarts 2018 edition. Now 2012 also saw the release of the first Trunks figure. Now this was the first figure to feature something other than hands or clothing in the form of a sword and a sheath for that sword. Interestingly enough, Trunks followed Gohan in terms of the amount of accessories he would come with. It's also interesting to note that the respective fathers, Goku and Vegeta, didn't come with any accessories at all. Perhaps this was due to a fear that Gohan and Trunks might not have sold so well as early on in the line. Nonetheless, they paid off and were well received. Now 2012's Sdcc exclusive figure was Gohan, and at this time, it was the anime colors that we all know and love. And while he wasn't the coveted Sdcc Goku, he was still a very welcome addition to the line, and actually synced up perfectly with Tamashi's next release, which was also the first DBZ villain to be released in the line, Perfect Cell. And much like his name, this release was near perfect. Aside for some loose joints and the much to be desired anime coloring, this figure was awesome, and it marked one of the first occasions where we see some sort of pairing theme within 2 releases in the line coincidentally. Now Sdcc also showed a prototype Napa that many fans demanded the release of, and at that time we never got a concrete answer as to whether or not we would actually get this Napa, and that would be the case for several years to come with his disappearance. So it seemed like Cell set the tone for things to come in 2013 as we finally received 2 more villains in the line, Saiyan Saga Vegeta and Frieza. 2013 also saw the release of 4 figures in total, with almost all including more accessories than the original trio in the line. With Scouter Vegeta, this was as close to Super Saiyan Vegeta as fans would continue to get for some time still. However, it was still a welcomed release, as at least it meant for those of us who missed out on a Vegeta figure could finally have the Prince of all Saiyans in our collection. 2013 also saw the release of one of the most iconic Dragon Ball Z villains of all time, Frieza. We'd finally be able to recreate that iconic, what seemed like took forever, battle on planet Namek with Goku and Frieza, and I think this is where even more fans who didn't necessarily know about Figuarts at the time started to notice and jump in the line. Now for this year's Sdcc exclusive, it was Piccolo, and for which the reason I believe was to round out the original trio and do them justice in terms of the demanded anime coloring and better overall job, now that Tamashii knew that the line was picking up steam and it wasn't a total waste of time to invest resources in these figures. And it's worth noting that this Piccolo is probably one of the best to date. That is, until we get an upgraded version. Hint hint, Tamashii. Continuing the trend of prototype reveals, this time we saw a huge Shenron which looked amazing. Now much like Napa, our wishes would not be granted and we wouldn't see anything from Shenron for another few years. Now finally rounding out 2013 was Krillin, the first new good guy for a while since 2012. Another solid release to end off the year, and the fact that he actually included the Destructor Disc was the icing on the cake. Now for me, 2014 was a big year, and I think for Figuarts it was even bigger, and you'll see why. The first release was a base form Goku. If you thought the buzz around Super Saiyan Goku was nuts, you'd be surprised to hear that the buzz was probably just as big for base form Goku as well, as collectors and completionists alike desperately wanted a base form Son Goku. And it's understandable, base form Goku brings with him a certain kind of happiness and innocence that you just don't get with Super Saiyan Goku, and that's represented by the faces he came with as well. Now the next release was quite a noteworthy one, as it was Android 18. Not only was this figure including new tech for crossed arms, but she was the first female figure too. I don't have to tell you that fans were going even more ballistic, and to this date, 18 still holds up to be one of the more well done figures in the line and is near perfect. And if it wasn't enough, she was still the first figure to feature parts for a previous release, that being Krillin. Her release also meant one other thing: number 17 wouldn't be too far off either. Now the summer of 2014 brought with it the return of good old Comic-Con in San Diego, where we saw the release of that year's Sdcc exclusive, Arlie and Vegeta. This might have been one of the first more so fan service releases Tamashii put out, as this is a figure based on very little screen time of this appearance in the anime. Of course, it helped that all the Sdcc figures are almost reissues of figures that they had put out before, and some people loved this choice while others weren't so convinced it was worth the buy. But the one major pro for this figure was that they finally fixed the rickety hips on the original Scouter Vegeta. As I mentioned, the release of number 18 meant Android 17 wasn't far behind, and he really wasn't, as he was the next normal release in the line for that year. Now just like his twin, his figure was near flawless and still holds up very well to the new figures to date. Arguably between him, 18, and another cybernetic individual, they are all probably some of the most underrated figures in the line. Both androids at this point included several accessories, including the most pairs of hands from any other figure in the line. Now remember how I said 2014 was a big year? Yeah. Well, if you didn't think everything else up to this point was a big deal, December 2014 also saw the release of the legendary Super Saiyan himself, Broly. This was a significant benchmark in the line, as it was not only the first gigantic character to be released, but was the first movie character to be realized in Figuarts form as well. And this was the first figure where we started to see some innovation in the line in terms of articulation, as Broly's massive stature was complemented with articulation which granted the figure almost as much motion, if not slightly more motion, than some of the smaller figures. Now interestingly, in an interview with Adam Newman, senior rep for Tamashii in the US at New York Comic Con in 2014, he said that the reason why they were able to do Broly was because of a fan survey response from the US. And interestingly enough, when he was asked about a reissue of Super Saiyan Vegeta in the same interview, he stated that Tamashii was aware of the extremely high demand and explained that while there is no current policy regarding reissues, if a figure was released as a web exclusive in one region, while released as an open market item in another, it's still fairly difficult to do a re-release with the same SKU. However, it doesn't mean they can't release some other modified form of a character such as Vegeta, which we would see a few years later. Now that's not all. 2014 also included the reveal of several prototypes for Super Buu, Gotenks Absorbed, and Gohan Absorbed, or Buhan, and most notoriously Super Saiyan 4 Goku, all of which we've heard nothing about to date. Now 2015 marked the year so far which we saw the most releases, with a total number of 6 normal releases and the annual Sdcc exclusive, counting for a total of 7 releases throughout the 2015 calendar year. Figuarts was here to stay. I also like to refer to 2015 as the year of Goku, and you'll see why. Now as if paving the way, Broly's release was followed by the release of another character which was actually taller than Goku for once, in the form of Android 16. And as I said, 16 in addition to the other androids is probably one of the most underrated figures in the line. Despite this, while the figure wasn't bashed, it didn't appear to fly off the shelves as quickly as his android counterparts. Overall though, 16 was a solid release in terms of his execution, and it may have just been the higher price point which scared off some of the other fans. 2015 also gave rise to the first Buu Saga character we'd see since Super Saiyan 3 Goku, in the form of Vegeta. Now Vegeta had attained a sort of mixed reaction from some fans. On one hand, this was the Vegeta, the Potara-fused warrior who made Super Buu look like Play-Doh. On the other hand, this was pretty much the same Goku mold that we've gotten time and time again. However, his saving grace was a different head sculpt which included both the base and Super Saiyan forms, as well as his Spirit Sword effect part. And while he is a very much desired character to have, fans have been waiting for an upgrade, which hopefully includes his Super Saiyan Blue form in the near future. And as if we hadn't seen the Goku body mold enough, Goku was chosen for this year's Sdcc exclusive yet again, this time with the inclusion of a kanji and a belt marketed as Namek Saga Goku. Despite the reissue of this all too familiar body mold, fans went nuts for this again. especially considering how another release of this figure was made a Mexican exclusive. 2015 cons also revealed some pretty awesome prototypes in the form of Beerus, Jocko, GT Goku in addition to SS4 Goku, and Angel Goku, Vados and Champa, and most interestingly enough, perhaps the biggest surprise of all, Super Saiyan 3 Vegeta. Now at this point in 2015, it was no surprise that Dragon Ball was back. We'd had Battle of the Gods in the year prior, and now we've gotten Resurrection F. And what better time for Tamashii to capitalize off the franchise's resurgent popularity than the release of Golden Frieza. While it may have seemed like a straight reissue just painted gold, the figure did sport some differences from his older, less shiny predecessor. One notable difference though is that Golden Frieza is supposedly taller and bulkier than Final Form Frieza, so what exactly happened here is questionable. Nonetheless, it marked the release of the first movie figure in the line since Broly, bearing in mind that Dragon Ball Super wasn't actually a thing yet. And as if it was a surprise, we got Super Saiyan Blue Goku shortly afterwards, or as he was marketed, Super Saiyan God, Super Saiyan Goku. Boy am I glad that they changed the name. This figure's release of course went hand in hand with Golden Frieza, but also featured a whole new look for Goku, something very refreshingly welcomed. In addition, his new Super Saiyan Blue hair sculpt was very much closer to that highly desired Super Saiyan 2 hair sculpt that fans have been demanding to date. But as if I spoke too soon, 2015 also gave rise to Ultimate Gohan, or Ultimate Gohan on a Goku body mold as some call it. If this was the last release of the year, it might have been a little bit concerning and left a bitter taste in some of the fans' mouths. However, it wasn't. Oh no, Tamashii had something far more spectacular in store. The next release to end off 2015 would change not only the look, feel, and articulation of Figuarts, but the packaging too. The end of 2015 marked the beginning of a new era for Dragon Ball Z Figuarts, ushering in the 2.0 line of figures with Super Saiyan Awakening Goku. Alright guys, hope you enjoyed that. That was part 1 of the history of Dragon Ball Z Figuarts. I hope you guys enjoyed this little segment, and as always, I hope the best of your todays are the worst of your tomorrows. Peace.